Hello, and welcome back to Kim Reads, as we continue with Straight On Till Morning, Chapter 1, London. Yes, it's a scene created so often it has become almost a character of a trope. But let's go through the process once again anyway, because it's necessary, even to this story. Low clouds do not blanket the sky, for that implies coziness and comfort. No, these clouds mask the sky, weigh the sky, choke the sky. They are strengthened by smoke from below, the trickling upward influence of 100,000 chimneys that decorate the landscape like unhealthily angular flowers. The slate and clay shingled, higgledy-piggledy rooftops seem to extend forever in an industrial, upside-down version of the fairy tale hills and dales in a children's book with bright pictures and bad perspective. Everything is in shades of gray and black. A great gray river slinks through the city like a tired but friendly snake, followed by bridges far less impressive than their names imply. Don't believe me? Look at the London Bridge and gaze at pictures. An utter disappointment. Of course there's Big Ben, the giant clock with equally giant gun, metal, and copper hands that an astounding number of fictional characters have wound up standing on at one point or another. Its bells, along with all church bells in their city, tolled the hour menacingly, with the obvious mournful implication of time passing, death coming, soups getting cold. On the cobbled streets below the towers and rooftops, weather had some impact and energy. The almost rain and morning mist combined to make a wet, stinging atmosphere. Those men swirling in great coats. Nannies build up their chargers and their moms shouting, "Come out of the garden, you'll catch your death in the fog." Also many umbrellas. So many black umbrellas with the usual spindly frame, like insects or skeletons or whatever, that watch them pass and almost tortuously jejune. There, London. End of one century, beginning of another. Got it? Good. Halfway between the umbrellas ended and where the sky should have started, maybe 20.5 feet below the tallest chimney, was one particular casement window. Gazing out of it was a young woman in an unfashionable pale blue dress. Her hair was on a popular shade of brown, and her eyes exquisitely normal blue for that time and place. At first she looked up at the sky, but it was impossible to take out any shapes in the clouds because of their utter completion, filling the heavens from one end to the other in the same unbroken handle. So she looked down, but the dismal garden below soaked up the wet like a moldy sponge. There were no puddles, no reflections. The tree was sodden. Nothing in the stolidly real vista was alterable by even the strongest imagination. There was no foothold for pirates, fairies, golden bridges, knights, or even a hint of swashbuckling. Someone from the street had thrown a brown banana skin over the fence, and there it lay, out of place in the English yard, attesting to the banality of global commerce and how it didn't bring with it sultans or magic horses, only bananas. Wendy sighed and turned from the window. Afternoons were the hardest. In the mornings she still saw her tutor, and there were chores and writing exercises. After 11 says was a good improving book recommended by the bookseller, the one with the handsome nephew. By then, Mrs. Darling had either gone to pay visits or was busily engaged in correspondence with her delicate blue pen at her elegant secretary. The gloom never seemed to affect her, even if she did stay home all day. She was always gracefully and slowly attending to some task or another. Her face, her toilette, her sewing, the little expense books she kept for the house, the pantry, their unpredictable cook, Mary. Wendy used to watch her mother engage in these endless circuits with delight, but that feeling was now tempered with confusion. How could someone remain so serene and glowing while working through the same window errands day in and day out. Wendy still enjoyed it when Mrs. Darling included her in some of her feminine rituals, which usually involved the proper application of powders and creams, tips on how to polish her nails, or ideas for sprucing up an old beau. She loved it when they had extra house money to go for a fancy tea out at Sacklebrie's, just the two of them. Wendy would admire her mother smiling and laughing beneath her many times renewed hat, and would think once again that she was the most beautiful mother in the world. She wondered when she herself would attain the delicate beauty, confidence, and perfection of manner. But these outings were rare, and anyway, even the most appealing things lost their glamour when held up to the imaginary delights of Neverland. Wendy turned to her bureau. Normally she tried resisting until the end of the day as a sort of reward, like the opera creams her mother secretly indulged in. Mrs. Darling smiled so blissfully while she chewed. She'd sometimes even pop on before dinner if it was an especially trying day. Often, when she attempted to peek in the drawing too early, Wendy would assuage her longing by pulling out the tiny notebook she always kept with her. It had a very slim blue pencil that perfectly fit down the spine, and that was nearly full of her neat, enthusiastic words. Well-thumbed pages were titled things like Peter Pan and the Pirates and the Unexpected Zeppelin, or Peter Pan and Tiger Lily versus the Cyclops of the Cerulean Sea. And she illustrated Captain Hook is taught a timely lesson by Peter Pan, with a little picture of a clock she had carefully copied from the mantel, as well as the eyes and nostrils of a fierce crocodile, the rest of whose body she had no hope of depicting accurately, and thus chose to submerge. But today the words looked bleak and worn, and the empty lines beyond them looked bleaker still. Wendy couldn't resist anymore. Not today, not when everything was so particularly gray and dreadful and hopeless. She slid open the creaky wooden drawer and picked up an inky, soft bundle that lay beneath the folded within. It shook out like a spider's web, softer than silk, and without the little catchy bits that clung to your rough fingers. Its outline deformed easily. Only when she laid it on the floor completely that she could coax the shadow in its proper shape. Peter Pan. 4 years ago today, Nana had torn it from the boy. For years, Wendy had kept it carefully safe in her top drawer, waiting for Peter to come back and claim it. Michael and John gave up first. In the beginning, they had even more exultant than she at the discovery. In Michael's case, jumping and crying and generally bouncing off the walls. John had pushed his ridiculous glasses up his nose and tried to speak in grown-up terms of actual evidence and irrefutable facts and the like. But weeks turned into months, into a year, into 4 years. There was no more proof, no more evidence, no more sign of a visitor from Neverland. And though the boys kept stealing quick looks at the shadow, Michael soon began to remark that it was kind of crummy and a bit faded, and John muttered darkly about the manifestations of another realm, a meteorological phenomena. Somehow, astonishingly, it just became another piece of bric-a-brac, a souvenir from an earlier time, or an only slightly more exotic place, like the tiny mosaic mirror Mr. Darling had brought from a man who was traveling back to his home in Kashmir. But every night since then, Wendy had gone to sleep burning for Neverland. She hoped, the way some questionable but trendy pamphlets suggested, that she thought about what she desired most before she fell asleep. She would dream of it. She dreamed off whispering, Peter, I have your shadow. Peter. She would often awake with a strange glass golden feeling, like she had just touched the boundaries of Neverland. Something about wolves and strange fruits and freedom. but then quickly forgot it. The feeling never stayed. Wendy rubbed a thumb along the edge of the shadow and shuddered. If she wasn't careful, she would begin weeping. What had she done wrong? What was so repulsive about her that Peter Pan wouldn't return, even for his shadow? What about her was so lacking that no one from Neverland ever sought out her again? She dropped the thing back into the drawer and slammed it closed, crushing a knuckle under her mouth to keep from sobbing. Soon it would be time to prepare for tea, and she didn't want her mother commenting about unattractive red splotches on her cheeks or rings under her eyes. In the afternoon, her brothers came home, and things would have been better. "John, Michael," Wendy said with relief, as their boyish humors and exuberance filled with otherwise silent house. "Greetings, sister," John said, handing her his hat while pecking her on the cheek with vaguely sarcastic air. He was bound for a real university someday, perhaps even Oxford, and already begun affecting the irony and insouciance necessary for a sojourn there. Michael just kicked his boots off willy-nilly and threw the coat in his chair. Of course, other families had maids to deal with such situations, but aside from the darling's general lack of excessive funds, Wendy enjoyed the routine. At least she used to. Tisking mindlessly, she picked up Michael's jacket and smoothed it out, hanging it up properly. "Wendy, you're a damn fool for not continuing your studies within the sphere of public education," John announced, sounding like someone else. He doesn't seem like the type to say damn, but alright. "It's heaps of fun, too," Michael growled, a stormy look on his face. He was a less subtle wielder of sarcasm than his older brother. "Well, Father said none of the daughters of his clients go. They're all respectable girls. And anyway, I have all the time and books I need," she added a little hollowly. It seemed like the right choice to decline when her parents had, somewhat reluctantly, present with her with the option of attending one of the newfangled public schools. Why should she spend time cooped up in a crowded institution and be treated like a child when she could have been a tutor and then putter around the house, dreaming and keeping things in order like an adult? "It's dumb. I hate it. School and its stupid rules," Michael shouted. "If you don't eat your peas, you can't have your pudding. Stupid lunch matron." "Now, Michael, I'm sure they just want you to have a nutritious, healthy supper," Wendy said, feeling the comfortable role of mother easily sliding over her with its dulcet tones and indulgent smiles banishing any uncertain feeling from the moment before. "Are there any of those French biscuits left?" Michael asked hopefully. "The ones you made?" "The ones I and Mother made. Perhaps I'll send you some and serve you a nice cup of proper tea while you go upstairs and bathe. And then, if there's time, I'll tell you a story before bed." "Oh, Wendy and her stories," John said with a smile and not quite a roll of his eyes. "I have too much reading to do, like actual reading, of actual history. Plus, Wendy, darling, I find your tales to have a bit of a Freudian bent to them these days. Haven't you noticed it's all fathers and sons and missing mothers?" "I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about," she said frostily. And she didn't, and indeed she didn't, but his tone was nasty enough. "I want 3 lumps in my tea and milk," Michael called over his shoulder as he stomped out of the room. "Oh," said Wendy, suddenly remembering. "Mother is supposed to come home from her dinner with Mrs. Crabapple tonight. If you hurry, you might get a good night. You might say good night to her before you turn in." "Oh, yes, Mother," John said thoughtfully. "Haven't seen her in ages. Tall lady, about so high. Would absolutely love to catch up with the old hen." "John!" Wendy put her hands on her hips. "Toodles, sister. Off to read some more Swiss psychology. You know the Swiss, all chocolate and timepieces and subtext." John made an elaborate bow, trying to tip the hat that was no longer there. Once he was gone, Nana, curled up comfortably in her early retirement by the fire, gave Wendy the sort of questioning look that only a really intelligent dog could. Well, I see the muddy tracks left on the floor, Wendy sighed, and no, I don't know what to do about them. Boys, they grow up so fast. Now that was an interesting idea. Neverland was full of children who never grew up. But what about a boy who grew up too fast? Literally, like hatching out of an egg as a baby and then attaining the height of a man by the end of the day. They watched the egg with unexpected faces. She murmured, trying it out. What's it going to be? Said Cubby. How should I know? Peter laughed. It'll be something great. You can count all that. Yes, that would be lovely. She pulled out her little notebook. Now that her brothers no longer cared to hear Wendy's stories, she had to put them somewhere. And maybe someday someone would like to hear them again. And I'm going to stop right there. See you